Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this planning meeting of Melton Borough Council. I'm Councillor Pam Posnett, Chair of Planning, and I'm really sorry that we've had to delay the meeting for 10 minutes. But as you see, that 10 minutes has made sure we're quorate, because we've now got two more members joining us. And one, I believe, has been in Mill Street for half an hour and is still waiting to get through. So we have two others who will be stuck in the traffic who should be arriving at some stage. In the event of having to evacuate the council chamber, please leave by one of the 6 emergency exits around the sides of the chamber. Please assemble at the far side of the front park, nearest to the park entrance. Officers will be on hand to assist anyone who needs any assistance. Please put your phone to silent during this meeting. We will be using the audio-visual system this evening, and the meeting will also be streamed live on YouTube. Members speaking, if you wish to speak, please raise your hand and speak directly into the microphone in front of you. Remember to turn it off once you have finished. Members voting will be by raised hands. I would like to introduce those present tonight. So the members here this evening are Councillor Rebecca Smith, who is substituting for Tim Webster, who is absent. Councillor Brown, Councillor Chandler, Councillor Evans, Councillor Illingworth, Councillor Wood. We're expecting Councillor Holmes and Councillor Illingworth once they can get through the traffic. We have a team of officers present who are to my right, our legal advisor, Tom Pickwell. To my left, our planning development manager, Louise Parker, Senior Planning Officer Andrew Cunningham, Planning Officer Gareth Elliott, Planning Officer Helen White, and we also have Sarah Legg joining us tonight, who will, I think in the next couple of weeks, become the AD for planning. And then we have Democratic Services here assisting us with the technology and taking the minutes. And that is Sarah Evans and Helen Ainge. We have apologies for absence from Councillor Glancy and Lumley, and also Webster, who's on holiday. We've got the meetings of the held on the 2nd of the 2023 minutes. We need a proposer and a seconder for those. So you've all read the minutes. Are there any issues? Can I have a proposer then, please? Rebecca, thank you. Seconder, Councillor Evans, thank you very much indeed. Has any member got any declaration of, sorry? Oh, the voting on the minutes was unanimous, is it? Yes, thank you. Declaration of interest. Members to declare any interest is appropriate in respect of items to be considered at this meeting. Are there any declarations of interest from anyone? No? Fine. Schedule of applications. First planning application is Saltby Airfield, Skillington Road, Sprosen. And the planning officer who will be taking us through those papers is Helen White. So over to you, Helen.
Thank you, Chair. So members may remember this application is a deferred item that was considered by members on the 13th of October 2022. The application was deferred to allow for further discussions between local residents and the developer. Firstly, with regards to late items, there have been 3 late items received since the report was published. 1 from Denton Parish Council and 2 from local residents. They don't raise any further issues that haven't already been covered in either the report for the deferred item or the original report for the 13th of October Planning Committee. So the application was deferred from Planning Committee on the 13th of October to allow for further discussions. A meeting was held at the council offices on the 14th of November. 4 out of the 5 parish councils who'd made comments on the planning application attended the meeting, along with Councillor Hewson as the ward councillor and the applicant and their agent, as well as planning officers. The meeting was considered beneficial in providing further clarity on what the proposed change of use entailed and for gaining a better understanding of the concerns raised by local residents. As a result of that meeting, a consensus was reached on the acceptability of the in route for HGVs via the Croton Kerrial junction. Concerns remained around the out route. 2 routes were originally put forward and were considered at the previous planning committee meeting. As a result of the discussions held on the 14th of November, a further out route was proposed. This was again considered by both Leicestershire and Lincolnshire as the local highway authorities. Neither of them objected to the proposed additional out route. So there's 3 potential out routes that have been put forward for HGVs leaving the site. All 3 of them have been considered acceptable in highway safety terms by Lincolnshire and Leicestershire as the local highway authorities. The reason behind committee's resolution to defer the application is therefore considered to have been addressed, and the application is still recommended for approval. There have been no changes to the conditions put forward from the previous planning committee.
Yeah. So I understand, Councillor Holmes. Okay. Right. Has anybody got any questions for Helen? Yeah.
So, Councillor Holmes, it's a decision for you to make. Obviously, this application has been here before, so you will have heard some of the presentation. Everything that the officers delivered in her presentation was contained within the report. So if you are satisfied that you've read the report and fully understand the background anyway, and you're prepared to take part in the rest of the item, I don't see why not. I don't think you'd be prejudiced by being a few moments late.
Thank you. I have left messages for Councillor Illing, for everybody, and I mean, I don't know what's the matter, but it's just right. I know.
Thank you. So
Thank
it's
you.
now open to questions. Anybody got any questions for Helen? Councillor Chandler.
Route you mentioned, is it Gorse Lane, Grantham?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions, anybody? No? Right, it's over to debate then. So who's going to start the debate? Oh, sorry, I'm running ahead of myself. We do have some speakers tonight, and the first one is Tricia Lawrence from Croton Kerrial Parish Council. So if you'd like to take the middle seat at the microphone. Thank you. And if you press the face in front of you, that'll light up the camera, your microphone's on. You have 3 minutes to speak, and I'll give you a warning at 30 seconds. Thank you.
Good evening, I'm Tricia Lawrence, a representative of Croton Kerrial Parish Council. We're still very concerned about this retrospective application, which is for industrial storage and distribution of fuel on a massive scale. Saltby Airfield is over 2.2 miles from the A607. All the routes to the airfield are along uncategorised rural narrow lanes. The large HGVs are struggling to get round the junctions. They have reversing beepers warning other road users when they're reversing. They sound like alarm clocks when they're within the residents' homes from 6 a.m. each day. The dust, straw and diesel fumes create a hazardous environment, particularly for the elderly and the young, while using their private gardens, which are on the road. This continues until 7 p.m. each evening. Both these severely compromise the amenity and ability of the residents to enjoy their homes, and we believe this contravenes Melton Local Plan Policy D1D. Therefore, we ask you to refuse this application. We met with the applicant at the council offices. They didn't offer anything to address our concerns about the moving of straw to and from the airfield, and they chose a route from Hungerton along Gorse Lane to Grantham without community agreement. They weren't honest about their intentions. In fact, even though they do not have planning permission, they commenced moving straw to the power station at 7 a.m. the next morning. This has shown us two things. Firstly, that they cannot control the HGV routes. There was chaos in Crowson and several other villages. HGVs were going along all the roads, some even along Heath Lane directly to access the A1, though the planning officer had outlined in the meeting that if this route was used, Highways England would become a statutory consultee. And secondly, to pass other vehicles, the HGVs must travel along the soft verges and are dangerously covering the roads in thick mud and straw. This wouldn't be acceptable in Melton and shouldn't be acceptable in the villages either. It's extremely dangerous for local drivers, pedestrians and cyclists, and we believe it contravenes Melton Local Policy C9D. Again, we ask you to refuse this application. The site is not for emergency use. As the applicant states, 42,000 bales is 18% of the straw needed to power the plant for the year. No one would purchase and store this straw without intending to use it. The application needs to restock the site annually, otherwise the quality of the straw deteriorates beyond use. To get 42,000 bales in and out of the site will take between 8 and 9 months of constant use. The precedent of 25,000 bales storage and 20 vehicles in and out per day has been debated and set as an acceptable level in Lincolnshire. If you really cannot refuse this application, we would ask you to at least cap the storage at Saltby to 25,000 bales so that the sense of harm is reduced, season of harm is reduced to 5 months and the residents in Melton Borough are treated equally to those in Lincolnshire.
Right, thank you very much. If you could just remain in your seat, some of the members may wish to have a question. Anybody wish to? Councillor Chandler?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Am I right in thinking that there's a large poultry farm on Saltby Road as well?
Yes.
Yeah, well, that will have numerous visits a day with feed. We keep chickens and I know how much chickens eat.
And on clearing days, it's continuous, the HGVs in and out.
You want cheap food, so that's what you get. I'm sorry.
Any other questions for the speaker? Councillor Evans?
Hello there, Tricia. Obviously we're in a tricky situation here because what the highways are saying, and you can see it in the papers, is that there is would not be a severe impact and it's acceptable, basically, the double negative would not be unacceptable. I wish I just put would be acceptable, but that's where we are. You're saying it's retrospective, so presumably the operator is already running full bore.
It's not running at the moment, but it was running from the morning after the meeting in November through to Christmas. And it was running in 2020 during COVID, but obviously there was a lot less traffic on the road then.
Could I ask a question? Obviously, you've had a meeting with the applicant and all the rest of it. Could you just give us a summary of what happened in that meeting? Because obviously it seems as though no progress was made at all as far as you're concerned.
No, in the meeting, the applicant discussed the routes and we discussed our concerns. We asked if the hours could be altered so that the impact was reduced on the residents. He said that that wouldn't be possible because of the need to use the HGVs fully. He suggested that if Amazon warehouses can be built and they're not a problem, why would this be? In response to the discussion regarding the impact on the people who live on the route.
The last question, obviously the HGVs, which routes have they been taking up to now?
They mostly go in through Crows and Kerrial. The HGVs going to the this power plant are now double length ones, so they're trailer ones. So they have to get onto the other side of the A607 to get round the corner. And then once they get round the corner, if there's anything else coming, they can't get up the road. So they have to reverse back onto the A607. They start with 2 parked outside the plant, outside the farm at 7 o'clock in the morning. To get there, they have to go through Crows and Kerrial very early, hence the reversing and beepers while people are still in their beds. Once they are up there, they park outside the front and wait. There's one waiting in the lay-by because they can't get, obviously they need to load them up to move them on. So there's one waiting in the lay-by at Crows and Kerrial until about 7, and then that goes through. And then they continue filling up and moving around all day. They've been going out mostly via the Wyville Road, but in various different guises in different routes. Some up and down, we've had some up and down Denton Hill, quite a few down Heath Road onto the A1 directly, some going through Gorse Lane. So, you know, there's no control as we see it, although the applicant has said he can control them, they're not being controlled.
Councillor Holmes.
Sorry about that. I've got a granddaughter not well, so. Yes, could I just ask you whether this Gorse Lane thing, I don't think right at all, because there's a little prep school there and it's not very wide at all. Now then, I've said this all along, why can't it carry on going up the Wyville Road that way? Because apparently Leicestershire and Lincolnshire County Council don't seem to care. So
Councillor Holmes, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Is that not right? I don't understand.
The roads and the direction they're travelling is outside planning. We're not discussing. That is not part of this meeting
Right.
tonight.
It was just something that
I
thank
know.
you very much.
Thank you. Any other questions? No? Fine. Well, thank you very much for your presentation. I'd now like to call Keith Burnett, who is an objector. Hello, if you press the face, that's fine. You
Will
might
do,
close on.
just keeping the reading glasses to hand.
You've got 3 minutes. I'll give you a warning at 30 seconds. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The committee set us 2 pieces of homework last time, and I shall try to report back briefly on both. Firstly, for public engagement, the local community arranged an engagement session last year, which the applicants were kind enough to attend to. There certainly were a number of concerns raised there about local amenity, particularly for those overlooking the site and those who find straw drifting into their gardens. The concerns are real enough that I think probably there are a number of policies. Trish has already mentioned some which apply, but I think probably policy EN1 around landscape, particularly paragraphs 5 and 6, may well have a call upon the committee's time. The more serious concern amongst local residents was around road safety. I think the consensus is that all of the lanes, narrow country lanes around the site, are too narrow to be dealing with frequent heavy industrial traffic. There certainly are a number of concerns around near misses, which many people have experienced. And for those who find that it doesn't feel safe to travel to and from their own homes, the loss of amenity is fairly severe. Now, there could have been some mitigations to this in terms of road widening or perhaps a one-way system, but it feels rather late on in the operation of the site to be considering those at this point. So I think from a point of view of local residents, policy IN2 around transport appears particularly significant. as a test for this application to pass, and I particularly draw your attention to paragraph 4 of that policy. The other area which actually there were a number of questions at the last meeting around was the environmental impact of this form of electricity generation. I'm sorry to say all of the authorities on this are unanimous that burning biomass cannot be carbon neutral within the technology currently available. And that appears to be a fairly insuperable barrier, unfortunately, for this particular type of scheme to pass at present. So I would draw your attention to policy EN10, particularly paragraphs 3, 12, 13, and indeed 14, which relate to this. There are technical reasons, which I'm happy to go into in supplementary questions if it's helpful, but the main issue there is the large quantities of diesel being burned to move the fuel around. I would just like to add, however, that there remains considerable goodwill between the applicants and local residents. Relationships remain largely rather cordial, and I think there's every reason for optimism that we will be
30
able to
seconds.
collaborate on other opportunities in future. Happy to hand you back to the chair.
Thank you very much. You just remain there. Are there any questions for Keith from any of the members? Councillor Evans?
Thanks, Keith. Obviously, in planning terms, we can't really go into a debate about environmental issues. That's not in as such, whether it's carbon neutral or the rest of it isn't ensconced totally in planning laws. The big issue seems to be here mainly from the residents, the actual transport issues and the noise. Is that correct?
Not quite. I think actually the residents do have concerns around the environmental impacts. And if you peruse policy EN10, particularly paragraph 12, it looks very much as if there is a significant issue in terms of what this proposal constitutes and an apparent clash with this council's planning policy.
You are right. We are trying for, obviously, we've done the climate emergency and all the rest of it, as all the councils in around England have. But obviously, we have to weigh that up against the benefits, and I'm sure the applicant will come forward with the benefits of biomass to burn.
Would it be helpful if I briefly quoted the policy element? Okay. Paragraph 12 of policy EN10 states that applications will be accepted if it can be shown that they do not create demand for bioenergy fuels known to result in net carbon emissions through production methods, transport requirements, and/or loss of carbon sinks. Now, I don't think there's a particular issue around the loss of carbon sinks here, but the production methods unfortunately involve burning fairly significant quantities of diesel, which itself emits carbon, which cannot be recaptured through the biomass burning plants. And the transport requirements obviously result in quite a lot of diesel being burned in Melton Borough. It's all very well the actual furnace being in a neighbouring district, but that means net carbon emissions here. And unfortunately, current technology doesn't really provide us an answer to that one.
Any other questions? Councillor Holmes?
If I could just ask this question of, have you any idea how much fuel is used?
I believe some back of the envelope calculations have been carried out, but whatever the estimate, unfortunately, it will always be positive. And unfortunately, in this context, positive is not a good thing. The biomass concept is predicated on the idea that grass which is growing will absorb some of the carbon released by the grass which is burnt, which is lovely in theory, but unfortunately, there is no mechanism to recapture the carbon emitted by the wagons and indeed some of the agricultural vehicles used to generate the straw bales in the first place. So I'm afraid that there simply isn't a way through that one in line with current planning policy within current technology.
Any other questions? No. Well, thank you very much indeed. I'd just like to say that Councillor Pritchett entered the chamber during that question and answer session. I'd now like to call Paul Watson, who's the agent, and I believe 2 other advisors are accompanying Paul to be able to answer some of our questions. Thank you. You have 3 minutes and I will remind you at 30 seconds. Thank you.
Good evening, members. As you're aware, this application came before the committee in October and it was deferred to facilitate further discussions between the applicant and the community regarding vehicle routing to and from the site. 2 rounds of discussions have taken place as a result. Firstly, we attended a village community engagement event held at Stuartby Church on the evening of the 4th of November. This initial meeting was attended by approximately 20 residents, and we found it extremely helpful, enabling those present to ask questions and for us to provide information and answers as far as we possibly could. It was explained to us at the end of the meeting that having listened to the discussions, residents would then be communicating their views to their parish representatives, who would put these forward at a second meeting that was arranged here at the council offices on the 14th of November. This second meeting was attended by representatives from 4 of the parishes, Ward member Councillor Hewson, officers and our applicant team. As has been set out in your officer's report, a general consensus was reached regarding the most appropriate inbound route, and it was also seen as important that vehicles should use an alternative route when leaving. Attendees were of the view that the vehicles should not access the A607 using the Denton junction, a matter that was also raised by this committee prior to the previous deferral. It was therefore agreed that we would go away and seek to provide an alternative proposal. A review was undertaken and in consultation with our highway consultants and the site operator, it was concluded that the use of the link through to the B1174 and then on to the A52 south of Grantham would meet the agreed objectives. Following an on-site assessment of the route and the junctions, this was defined on a plan and submitted to the case officer as had been promised, so that it could be passed to the parishes and residents for further consideration. The proposal responds positively, in my view, to the issues raised and is again supported by both highway authorities. The deferral has been very helpful in facilitating discussions between the parties. Greater clarity has been provided regarding the application, and to the extent I've outlined, the key routing issue was addressed. It is hoped, and we propose, that regular liaison meetings with the parish representatives should continue, so that if any specific issues do arise in the future, these can be communicated to
30
us
seconds.
and we can take action to address it. So in conclusion, we have no objections from the statutory technical consultees, and we hope the committee will feel able to support the officer's recommendation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. If you can all just remain there. Any questions? Anybody? Councillor Illingworth?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, crux of this is large vehicles down narrow roads, and it's been mentioned on more than one occasion, notwithstanding the routing, the actual width of roads and the possibility of destroying grass verges, and maybe even somebody ended up in a ditch. Have you gone as far as checking road widths along that exit route, which seems to be the most contentious? And is there, are some of the lanes slightly wider than others? Have you chosen one in that light? And are you happy that the width allows an HGV and anything from a car to another HGV coming in the opposite direction? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I shall address that question. I'm the highway consultant on behalf of the applicant. The very point here is that we wanted to seek to separate the inbound and the outbound movements, so we don't get 2 HGVs from the site conflict. I would say conflicting, but coming against one another. So that was the main objective of this additional appraisal. We identified that, yes, the route down to the Denton Crossroads, in our view, wasn't ideal. And therefore, we looked at the secondary route which has been put forward in this paper, which is going along Gorse Lane. Now, as a professional highway engineer, I have done an assessment of that route, and it is my view that it is acceptable both in highway safety terms and in geometric design. And that view has been supported by Leicestershire County Council and Lincolnshire County Council, in that they have offered no objection to the application on grounds of highway safety. So I maintain the view that whilst there is a perceived impact, And that's a very key word, a perceived impact. The reality of it, of that any impact, in my view, is minimal.
Thank you. Can I just remind members that we are not here to discuss routing. That is not a planning concern. So whatever questions you want to give, can you not use those, because I'll only interrupt you and stop you. Okay, thank you. Councillor Evans.
Thank you very much for your talk on this. As has been pointed out, obviously the highways people have said there's no problem, but obviously members of the public are concerned about their environment, and there are policies within our environment that say we should minimize the impact of any development in environmental terms. Are you saying that you have to use double trailers for this development to be profitable? And do you need more than 25,000 bales to be on the site, which is what one of the speakers said, to make it a viable operation? In other words, if those two impositions were put upon you, would that be acceptable?
Good evening, Councillor. My understanding is that the way the operation works is that if we reduce the vehicles down to much smaller vehicles, then obviously there would be a lot more vehicles, and it makes it less economical. And some of the issues that have been talked about traffic and extra movements would double by reducing the size of the vehicles. So I don't think that's something that the operator would be able to accede to.
Capacity of bales?
I mean, the number of bales was discussed quite, as you can imagine, quite closely with the operator before the discussions on this application have come to committee, and the 42,000 was arrived at as something that they felt, again, they needed to make this a viable proposition for them on this site, and to cover their potential needs. So I wouldn't like to say to you that 25,000 would be a fantastic position for us, because the 42,000 has been carefully considered in a lot of detail in terms of the operational requirements and viability.
Holmes.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. When this operation started, were the size of vehicles the same as they are now? Or
Sorry to
Sorry.
keep looking at my colleagues, Councillor, but my colleague here works on the farm every day, and so I'm told, yes, they have always been the same size of vehicles.
continue. I presume you're in close negotiations with the Glider Club as well, are you? Because I just wondered if there is any way, I'm not talking about in and out or anything, but the movements might be made easier if you had more width to get out of these places. I'm not talking about routes as such.
Sorry, Councillor, do you mean the actual in and out of the site itself? Yes, there are proposals as part of this site with detailed drawings showing the accesses and the correct visibility that's required for vehicles of this side. And I believe that's a condition of the permission proposed by the officer, that has to be put in place straight away and maintained.
So you are actually discussing things. It might be in a different area where you might be able to go in and come out if you were discussing this with the Glider Club. Is that right?
No, not the Glider Club. This is the proposed accesses to the site that are part of this application. There's one in from the west side and one out from the north.
I was asking this question
Just specifically on that point, I don't believe the applicant, whilst he has control of part of the land of the Glidey Club, he doesn't have rights of access over it. So therefore, we can't discuss that to a third party.
Councillor Illingworth.
Clarity, this 25,000, 42,000, do they represent the number of bales processed during, shall we say, a season or a year? Or does that represent the buffer stock on the site at any one time? Because I don't know what the usage is when it starts going out, but as it's coming in and going out, 42,000 bales seems a lot as a buffer stock when it's a constant, you know, in and out process. Perhaps you could clarify.
Yes, Councillor, it's not, I think hopefully it's come across in the application. There are great long periods where nothing is coming in or going out of the site. It sits there as a buffer stock. And really it's only really replenished at the harvest time when stock comes in, and then stock goes out over the year as it's needed. I think the question was asked last time about the longevity of it, and provided I'm advised, I'm a lay person in this regard, I'm advised that as long as it's well stacked and well covered, you can get 18 months to 2 years out of the stock. So it goes out when needed, and then replenishment happens during the harvest.
Councillor Chandler.
My question follows on quite well from that, because there's a lot of straw on the airfield that's not last year's straw. It's visible to anybody who knows anything about agriculture that some of it's a lot longer, a lot more aged, shall I say, than last year.
That's correct, Councillor. And I think as we said last time, that when the need to apply for planning permission for this came to light and the application was made, the farm owner discussed this with the operator and has done everything they can to absolutely minimise any use of the site and not prejudge the committee's decision. So you're right, we are starting to get to a problem where the straw is going over at the moment.
Are there any more? Councillor Wood.
Just in terms of how much is needed, can you give us some idea over the last 3 years what the annual volume of bales going out has actually been? Is it, you know, has it been 42,000 per year, or are you talking in terms of 25,000 a year going out?
We could certainly get that information, but it's not immediately. I know what I can say, Councillor, is, and I think the thing that, and we have discussed with the residents, is that the concerns that have been arisen from this was because there was a point where a lot of straw was brought to get that stock on the site, and since then there has been nothing like that going off and coming in. It's been as required and then replenished in smaller batches. If it's something that members would like to see, we could produce that information through the officer. But
the only reason I ask is that earlier you said that a stock of 25,000 wouldn't be enough. But from what you're saying now, it sounds like that's perhaps the kind of volume that's going out each year. So actually to have more than that may be surplus to requirement.
Well, we certainly have weighbridge records, so we could work it out. I'm just tell you, unfortunately, I can't tell you off the top of my head exactly what the volumes were over the last 2 years. Actually.
Okay, any more questions? No? Well, thank you very much, Mr. Watson. If you'd like to
Thank you.
retake your seat. Helen, have you got any comments to make?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I just want to clarify with regards to policy EN10 that was referred to by the local resident objecting to the application. So policy EN10 is a policy regarding energy generation from renewable and low carbon sources. And the policy's main aim relates to renewable and low carbon energy proposals. And this policy wasn't included in the consideration for the proposed planning application, because this application is for the storage of straw. And although it would be used by a power station, it's not in itself an application for renewable or low carbon energy proposal.
Okay. Councillor Holmes?
So can I just ask, Helen, if that was a mistake by not putting that in, because surely it's all part of what's happening here, isn't it? Because obviously, I understand E10, but surely if this is, and we're looking for all this sort of thing, I would have thought that would have been in our recommendations, wouldn't it? Is there a mistake or something? I don't know.
So in reply to you, Councillor, I considered that policy wasn't relevant in the assessment of the application, because, as I said, the policy is written from a viewpoint of applications for renewable and low carbon energy proposals. And this isn't an application for a renewable or low carbon energy. It's for straw storage that would then be used by a kind of an energy plant, but it's not in itself an application for a low carbon energy proposal. Okay.
Councillor Wood?
Just to save some possible sort of going around the houses later on, is the volume of storage in terms of number of bales a material planning issue or not?
I suppose the question is, can you condition it if that's what you're thinking of doing? You would need to meet the MPPF test of whether that's necessary to do. So if you found that was a necessary thing to do, then you could look at doing it. But that's what you need to establish if that's what you were seeking to do. You couldn't just do it because you thought that was a relevant number and that's what they were doing. You would need to establish that was necessary.
Thank you.
Anything else, Helen? Oh, Councillor.
Helen, could you just remind me what, as I don't have the policy book in front of me, is what C9D is? What does that refer to? That was mentioned in the debate. Oh, sorry, in the presentations.
Yes, I'll just bring that one up for you, Councillor. Yeah. So policy C9 is the healthy communities policy. And part D of that policy relates to healthy homes. So the policy says all development proposals should make a positive contribution to the following promoters of health and well-being. And part D specifically is healthy homes that are affordable, easy to warm, have good natural light, decent space, internal and external, exploit views, safe from flooding and overheating, and are adaptable to people's changing circumstances that can occur over a lifetime. But that's part D of policy C9, but I think, which was referred to, and part D of policy D1 was also referred to. Policy D1 is the design policy, but part D does relate to residential amenity.
Okay. Before we start the debate, I would just like to remind you that we cannot go against highway advice, because that's a statutory consultee. And the planning application is not for routing, so we can't consider that when we're making our decisions. So who'd like to start the debate? Councillor Chandler.
Some 10 years ago, this council, when I was chairing planning, sent me on a long weekend to York University, and my speciality that I was handed was Drax Power Station. I spent a very interesting day there. I had no knowledge of renewable energy at that time. Drax had just gone off burning coal, but they still were burning some coal because coal was coming in from Poland, but it was the only thing that was carbon neutral because it came over the sea, or so they said, without burning any carbon. I'm not quite sure how they did that. And then it got on a train at Immingham Docks and went straight up to the power station. Everything else at the power station, wood from Scotland, straw, they were burning a lot of straw at the time, all came by road. And the managing director of Drax said, we can't be carbon neutral. Our aim is to produce carbon neutral energy, but we ourselves cannot be carbon neutral. And I think this is something we've got to remember. Everything went in by road. The roads around there were no better than the roads at Sleaford. I mean, coming from the Lincolnshire border, I get a lot of flack from people in the Sleaford. I know people in the Sleaford area who say it's absolute chaos around that AD plant there. It's not a power station, it's an AD plant actually. And we've got to go carbon neutral. I'm not saying we haven't, but it's going to bring us an awful lot of problems, both financially and in our way of life. And I think the report is quite good, and I can't really say any more. I mean, I will support the recommendation when you've had your final debate, but certainly Drax was an eye-opener to me.
Thank you, Councillor Chandler. Any other, Councillor Evans?
Yeah, this is obviously a tricky one, and we can see where we're coming from here. I agree with you. We can't consider where the lorries go. They're going to sport. We know where they're going and all the rest of it. Obviously, on the one hand, we've got a business that is obviously using straw and burning it. And obviously it needs to get from A to B and all the rest of it. On the other hand, we have the impact on the residents via the routes that goes through, and we have to consider it. There is another policy that I've just looked at, EN8, climate change, which makes it very clear, and it says all new development proposal will be required to demonstrate how need to mitigate and adopt to climate change has been considered. I don't see any consideration in that here, or any way that is tried to be mitigated as much as possible. And that's what concerned me, and that is a policy that we, as councillors, voted effectively for when we went for a climate emergency. And we all know, we've seen the news recently, it said it's either now or never for the world. And we need to be certain we're getting this right from now on. I feel uncomfortable with this because it doesn't feel right. I think personally,
I'm not saying that, Councillor Evans, but it doesn't really relate to what we're
yes, it
looking at
does.
tonight.
EN8 is a policy, Chair, and it's a policy we need to respect, which all new applications have to consider the climate impact. You can't deny that, and neither will the officers, or neither will your solicitor sitting beside you. There is an impact on this application which needs to be considered.
Helen, can you say why that policy wasn't part of your recommendation?
Policy N8 was a consideration, and it was included in the original planning committee report in the assessment that was made. Let me just see if I can find the relevant section, Chair. So in the addendum report, in terms of kind of mitigating carbon production, it says to minimise costs and mileage, the straw stored at Saltby is straw that would otherwise be passing by the site as it's transported to the power station. So this information was provided in the context of carbon emissions generated by the proposed use. So that's paragraph 1.6 part C of the report for this planning committee. And then if I just go back to the report that I did originally, I don't think it was necessarily explicit in the committee report, but it was a policy that was considered as and is included in the list of conditions that were taken into account in considering the planning application. I'm just seeing if there was anything.
Could I just ask one question, because my memory's not so good, but I'm sure when this came to committee before, we had a lot more information and a lot more pages and facts than we have in this brief. This one seems to be a very brief summary from the last one.
Just to clarify, the previous committee report is attached as an appendix to this committee report.
There are quite a few pages missing. Some of the appendices from the last report, that's where I found all of the relevant planning policies, because I checked for EN10 and that's definitely not on there, but EN8 absolutely is. Yeah, that's what I was going to say when I raised my hand. I had to go online on the council website and found it on the previous agenda from October. It does say in this paper copy of the report that all of the relevant policies are on Appendix D, but that's not included in either of the reports on here.
Are there any other questions, comments? Councillor Illingworth, yeah.
It was surprising and enlightening to hear, and I think it impacts on the issues that we're getting slightly bogged down on, is that this is not a plan, this is not an energy development, it's a storing some bales of straw development. And most of the policies that I've heard quoted quite clearly relate to new building, new developments, etc. So I think we need to distill our thinking down to, we have an application in front of us to store some bales on some land. And I just want to be absolutely sure that that is the case, because that to me, that renders an awful lot of the discussion potentially non-relevant, I hate to say.
Yes, Councillor Illingworth, you are correct. We are looking, it's an application for storage. No, unfortunately, it isn't. So that's what we're looking at planning. We're not looking at climate matters or anything, or access.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Illingworth. Councillor Evans.
Yeah, to me, there's a serious issue here because, as has been pointed out, yes, the original report's here, but no, none of the appendices from the original report are attached at all. So we're looking at a mini report of what we looked at last time. We haven't got the summary of statutory consequences from that, summary of representations, recommended planning condition, informatives, available development policies is not in this document you've sent to us for the planning meeting.
Yeah, Councillor Evans, because it was deferred,
Yep.
what has happened, that always happens, the original report is revised. And that's what's happened with this report. But
No.
Helen has covered a lot of the things that you were talking about. And we can't get away from the fact, I know we all want to do the best we can for the climate, but this has nothing to do with it. It's just about storage.
I'm trying to say that you're right, Helen, you put in the report we had from the last meeting, but it is not comprehensive. It does not have the appendices that came with the initial meeting that we held in the planning committee, with important evidence in it, with important respondents.
Members, I think what you're trying to say is that the report that's come out in the paper copy has only got the new report. So the previous reports were appended to that. Obviously, we don't receive the paper copies as such. We only get the digital report packs, which you've also all received. They should have been included in there, and you should have had the report previously anyway. My question to you, Councillor Evans, what is missing from the report and information in front of you that you, not in terms of the actual Appendix D, but what information do you further require at this point to assist you in making a decision?
There was a summary of statutory consultation responses in the first one, then the representations received, recommended planning conditions, informatives available, or A, B, C, D, E, which I remember was quite a number of pages, and they've disappeared.
It says here at the end of the second report that we've had, that we have appendices A through to E. But in the paper copy of the report, if you turn to page 30 of your paper copy, that's where it says about the appendices. If you turn to the next page, it's agenda item 4.2.
Yeah.
And I don't know about anyone else on the committee, but I find those planning policies really useful. So.
Councillor Illingworth.
Chair, sorry, I don't want to end up in an argument or a tit for tat. I'm a bit of a stickler for procedure, being as Councillor Chandler, a previous occupant of that seat. I think the report is briefer because it essentially deals with the issues, the reasons why we deferred it. And going back even before Melton Borough, my days on Melton Borough Council, the legislation was effectively that if you defer something or refuse it on some reasons, and those reasons are overcome, you can't then go back and find other things to refuse it on. So it would appear that the reasoning behind the deferral has met with a degree of consent, and that, you know, to me, that makes it quite simple. Doesn't matter how unpalatable I might find it, makes it simple.
Well, can I just say, we have got appendix A, B, and C. Or at least I have, if everybody else hasn't. In my paper copy, so there's no reason why others shouldn't have it. But I think we are trying to go back and we're not looking at what the planning is for, and the planning is for storage, and nothing else is open for debate tonight.
Should be accepted, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Illingworth. Councillor Illingworth has proposed that the planning officer's permission to permit goes ahead, and Councillor Chandler has seconded that. Can I have a show of hands for everybody in favour? debate. It's level. Yeah, yeah. So we've got 4-4. So 2 against, any abstentions? And 3 abstentions. So the motion is carried, permit is given to this application. Thank you very much for your time, everybody. If you now wish to leave the meeting, please do so. Thank you. That was worse than drawing two, can I say? Right, we're now on to our second application this evening, which is the application is for land at Main Street, Wymondham. And Gareth is taking that paper. So over to Gareth, if you take us through that, please.
Thank you, Chair. This is the application edged in red, the land at Main Street, Wymondham. The application site is located to the north of Main Street, which you can see running through east to west through the bottom of the slide. Then you have Brickyard Lane running close to the eastern boundary of the site. The black outline close to the edge of the highway is a redundant storage building. The closest property is number 17, which is just to the southeast of the application site, detached residential dwelling. And the other side of Brickyard Lane is number 25. The proposal is for it's an outline application with all matters reserved, with the exception of access for up to 24 dwellings. If we move to the next slide. This is the proposed access into the site. Again, you have Main Street running east to west throughout the site. Brickyard Lane is just to the east. The design and layout of the access point has been through consultation with the County Council Highway Authority, who are accepting of the design layout. If we move to the next slide, thank you. This is an aerial shot of the application site. Again, the application site is within the red edged area. The black hatch area is the reserve site. Through the life of the application, there's been some discussions between the agent and the case officer. The application site has been reduced in size, and the original 34 dwellings has now been reduced to up to 24 dwellings. The yellow arrow there is just to indicate a field which has got some well-preserved ridge and furrow. As members will be able to see, this is quite a distance from the application site. It's not affected by the proposed development. The proposal has been subject to a workshop meeting with the Parish Council. The case officer is very mindful that there are still some concerns that have been raised by the Parish Council. However, through that workshop meeting, the concerns have been reduced and narrowed to predominantly flood risk only. The application site is allocated within the neighbourhood plan and the local plan for residential development. There's been no objections from technical consultees. Officers are happy that the development complies with the allocated policy for the site. There's been a full range of infrastructure contributions that's been agreed. And in addition to the infrastructure contributions within the committee report, there's also been an ICB consultation with a health contribution for £11,000. This has also been agreed. The affordable housing is set at 40%, and that has also been agreed. So the application comes forward with an officer recommendation for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Any questions of Gareth, anybody? Councillor Chandler.
2.1, sustainable travel. Can you explain that to me? There's no railway station at Wymondon. There's a very limited bus service. When I was mayor, went to the school. I know it was 5 years ago now, but the main thing I got from both the members of staff at the school and a lot of the elder pupils was that it was virtually impossible to get to Melton or Grantham. You could get to Oakham better, and most of the children who were leaving the school in the end of the summer term were actually going to Catmose College at Oakham or Oakham School, because if they came into Melton and they stopped for after school activities, they couldn't get home. So where does this sustainable travel come from?
Just to clarify the question, is it sustainable travel in terms of children going to education provisions or in general, or in general? Okay. But Wymondon is a service centre within the settlement hierarchy. So it's defined to be a sustainable settlement, and this is an allocated site in both local plan and neighbourhood plan. So it's being considered to be a sustainable site for residential growth.
I led on the local plan, perhaps you weren't here then, and it was done in 2016. That's 7 years ago. We went around the villages. I went to village meetings everywhere, and I think at that time Wymondon had got a bit of a shop, and bus services were much more frequent than they are today. And I think, I mean, the local plan is up for review, and I think this is something that's got to be looked at, what facilities villages now have. Because certainly there were 5 years ago, there was great concerns about how anybody could get anywhere from Wymondon, and we kept building houses there.
Thank you, Councillor Chandler. If it's okay for me to just come in there. The local plan remains valid at this point. So whilst I take on board that things do change and that local plans can last for a long time, at this point it remains an allocated site, which is why Gareth said it's a sustainable site, because it is allocated. There's nothing to say that it isn't now allocated.
If we're building houses for young people and there's no services, it's who's shooting themselves in the foot, the developer or us?
Yeah, no, I completely appreciate what you're saying. That's something that would get picked up in a local plan review or a new local plan, but whilst it remains allocated, it's an allocated site.
Councillor Brown.
Yeah, just Gareth, just a little bit confused about the affordable housing mix. Just stuck on, so there's Thomas. Can you hear me? Can you hear me now? Yeah. Okay, yeah. Sorry, at 4.26, it says 37% affordables, then 4.31, and you go to 40%, but meeting the required 37, and you mentioned in your presentation 40%. Then if I look at page 43, 40% would be 9.6, and you're providing 9, or this development is providing 9. 9.66, would you not round up rather than round down? And also, what is the affordable home ownership? What is that exactly?
Yeah. Yeah, thank you, Chair. So 37% is the requirement within the neighbourhood plan. 40% is the requirement within the local plan. In this situation, the local plan is newer than the neighbourhood plan, takes precedence. And we've secured agreed 40% with the agent. So that if it's 24 units, it would be 10 units, which would be 40%.
Yeah, so, but you're supplying 9, so you're 1 short.
No, and it's 10.
Eh?
Yes.
Am I reading something wrong here? Sorry. Oh, that's okay, sorry. I think that as it says in the appendices. Oh, your recommendation, right, sorry, I was confused, that's my fault.
Councillor Smith.
Yeah, so I just had a question, and maybe I'm just getting confused. So this application is for up to 24 dwellings, but then in 2.2 it says that it's allocated with an estimated capacity of only 20. So how are we kind of juggling that?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So it's estimated capacity. It's not a set figure, and this is up to 24.
Okay, so it is that, will that become an issue at a later stage in the application process then, rather than at this point? Like when it comes to like the scale and layout and stuff, is that when this would become an issue that we could potentially discuss? Got you. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Illingworth.
Thank you again, Chair. Yes, so it's in the, it's an allocated site in the neighbourhood plan, the local plan. It meets the requirement for affordable housing, and it's in line with the existing policies, albeit that we may view some of those policies as having become a little aged and in need of refreshing. Timing is everything. That's where we are at the moment. I propose that it is approved as in line with officer's recommendation, because we are only talking about the access.
We haven't got to debate yet. We're still
Oh,
asking
we
questions
can't.
of the officers.
Oh, I thought we were.
No, sorry. And now you've been accused of predetermination, so you won't be able to take part.
So, Councillor Illingworth, it's been suggested that by putting forward your motion now that you might be predetermined. That, of course, is a decision for you to make into what the perception would be. So if you are prepared to listen to the speakers, listen to the rest of the debate and take part and remain with an open mind as we progress, and you can confirm that, then you could say that you're not predetermined. If you've already decided that in your mind that actually that will not now be changed, then you are predetermined, and that's a decision that you will need to make.
Thank you. I didn't come to this meeting predetermined. During the course of the meeting and hearing the questions asked and looking at the report, that's why I did what I did in
Okay.
error. I am always open-minded and I'm happy to listen. And if any argument comes up that makes me review my position, I will do. Thank you.
Councillor Pritchett.
Thank you very much, Chair. Obviously, I've just got a few points of clarification. Appendix A, I've taken into account the Parish Council comments. Can I clarify that this is an outline application and the detailed questions and any concerns from the parish would come up again? They get a second go at the detailed design stage. Is that correct?
Right.
Thank you. Thank you. Condition 3, this is quite serious for me. It should refer to housing mix and affordables. Should this refer to the housing mix and affordables SPD, and importantly the design SPD, and that there's no mention of NPH2, which is the neighbourhood plan policy regarding design, which points to wanting a design similar to the Old Manor Gardens, which is referred to in the narrative of the report. And whilst the local plan came after the neighbourhood plan, I do see from your report that you're quite willing to acknowledge parts of it in the decision. So I'm questioning that if this was sold on to a developer and they came back looking at it, how they could look at their loopholes, shall we say, it would seem to me that condition 3 needs tightening up, Chair. Referring just specifically to the SPDs, they are mentioned at the back. There's a list at the back of the documents to say what the planning officers have considered, but as I say, I thought it was a loophole within with condition 3, and also whether conditions 2 and 5 needed amending as well.
Gareth.
If I could just clarify, is it the list of policies within the reasons associated to those conditions that you're referring to?
I think there should be explicitly mentioned in the condition where you are referring to policies. Like I says, well, I think you should refer specifically. I'm looking at a potential weakness when it comes back at design. If you do not specifically mention those SPDs and NPH2. So I'm asking quite clearly whether there's a loophole there that could be, or you could remove even the possibility of a loophole by just amending that condition. And I don't see it, it alters the thrust of what you're trying to achieve anyway.
Yeah, okay. Well, I can reassure you in that any reserve matters application would be assessed against those policies regardless, but I don't see an issue with adding to the reason for that condition to add those policies as well.
Right. Thank you very much. Can I clarify that as this started out, what was a reserve or added area, windfall area, has now been excluded from your negotiations?
Correct. Yes.
The next question is, forgive my hearing, when you were just giving your report there, you mentioned £11,000. Was that for local NHS services? Yeah. Right.
That's correct.
Well,
yeah.
in the report, it doesn't give anything for NHS services. It's an omission. And my question was, did they reply stating nil, or has there been a lack of a response chased up? Because in the report, it doesn't mention the NHS. Then you've just mentioned £11,000. Paragraph 4.41 on page 38 doesn't include the local NHS.
If I can clarify the situation, there is a Leicestershire and Lincolnshire ICB, and the correct ICB was consulted at a later date. Hence, we have it was a late response to prior to this meeting and wasn't included in the report for that reason.
Right. So have you had a response? Is it from Market Overton, the Leicestershire and Rutland integrated care board? Because for some near the borders, we sometimes get two competing bids for money, but you've actually confirmed that you've got one in on file, right? And how would that affect us tonight when it's not in here approving? How would it affect the legal position in approving a recommendation where you've got it on file and now it's on the portal, but it's not in here? The 11,000's not here unless it's minuted. Would that be appropriate if it was minuted, Mr. Solicitor?
Yeah, provided it's minuted, you can do it as a verbal update, and as long as that's in the motion, should that be the motion to approve subject to a 106,
so
then there's no reason it can't be minuted.
Right, so I suppose we can say that that's minuted. There's no section 106 from the Parish Council.
Yes, we haven't received any contribution requests from the parish.
Was it mentioned to them at the workshop, the outline workshop that you did?
We focused on the objections and the comments raised by the parish on that.
Right. So do we know if the Parish Council are aware of what section 106 is and the developer contributed the law relating to it?
We have got to speak from the Parish Council.
Pardon? I've got to speak from the Parish Council. I think Councillor Chandler's covered the fact that it's a service centre, and I acknowledge it's a service centre in the existing, and about the buses. I mean, it does have an antique shop. So a condition 13, finally, you'll be pleased to know. The biodiversity. I was very pleased to see the biodiversity add back at the attempt. So I'm not going to look at that in detail. I think it's come before November, and I'm very pleased that voluntarily that's come forward. But the condition 13, does this need to add in referring to the Environment Act 2021 as applicable if the reserve matters comes back after November 2021, when the biodiversity add back becomes law? Does it need to refer that it would need to comply with that if it came back after November?
I would need to double check. I'll check now. My understanding is it's from the outline stage of the application. So it's not for any sort of reserve matters that have already got outline approval. Unless any of the other officers know different. That was my understanding, but I'll double check that now whilst we carry on.
Yeah, well, the reason I'm asking you is I'll give you an example at Asford Bay. There was a requirement for a play area in the outline. And then the local plan came in with EN7 that said you didn't need a play area, and therefore the applicant, in conjunction with the Parish Council, was able to remove the liability. So I'm just saying it seems to be. So can you find that one out and see whether it needs to be altered for that?
Sorry, just Councillor Pritchard, very quickly. My understanding is that the Environment Act will bring in a 10% requirement, ideally on site, and this provides over that anyway. So I don't think the Environment Act would give it any sort of.
No, but the Environment Act does bring any other things and gives options for off-site and various other options. But anyway, just thought I'd mention it. Thank you very much.
Councillor Holmes. Microphone, please. Councillor Holmes.
It's on. Can you go back? I'm being difficult. Can you go back to the last slide for me, please? Thank you, Helen. Oh. No, the one where it was hatched across the black. Yeah, that's it. Now then, so we went up that really little lane. And so at the side of that, there's a house, but at the side of that, that is where the entrance is going to be onto the main street. Is that right? Oh.
Yeah, so
Isn't the red lot? Yeah, there. Is that where it's going to be? Why did we mention the hatch bit?
the hatch bit is the reserve site. So it's just to indicate that it does not form part of the application site anymore.
Ah, right. But so the other side of the red bit on the left, where you there, there looks to be, I know you said there's rig and furrow, but there's rig and furrow on the left as well, isn't there? Next to the site.
The only well-preserved ridge and furrow is on the field identified by that yellow arrow.
I've looked at this as well. Don't we're farmers, you know, got a bit of an idea. There's definitely there's a look of ridge and furrow there. So obviously you would have to have the heritage and look at this in really great detail anyway, wouldn't you? You know, it's going to be archaeological finds probably on there. The other thing was EN12 sustainable drainage. And we notice here the parish council are concerned about the drainage, sewage, whatever. I know this is only outline, but can we make sure that if this is permitted, that we make sure that sustainable and that EN12 sustainable drainage comes to the fore. I cannot see that, because I can see where it is and it's coming downhill. And it has to be in the full, it must be, because we are getting to such a stage where at Waltham, they're digging up again the new development that's being dug up. And this is going to keep happening. So I'm just making that point, please.
Any other questions for Gareth?
Yeah, could I just ask, can you go forward one slide, please? Nope, that's the one there. These weren't in the paperwork. What are these? So this is the first time we've seen these, isn't it? It's not been in the paperwork that's submitted to us. Are these from the applicant? I assume they are.
Yeah, this is from the applicant, but it's also included within the transport statement, which is a submitted document, supporting document as part of the application.
Right, but it's not in our paperwork here. That's extra. That's all I'm saying, because it's not in here, is it? Anywhere. Could you go back to where the outline? I mean, obviously it's outlined, so it's not that one. Next one, please. There. So that's presumably is not committed, but that's an idea of what the site will look like submitted by the applicant.
This is an indicative layout
Yeah,
as to how
that's the word. Thank you.
the scheme could come forward of that
Yeah.
number of units with that number of landscaping.
That's how it'll look,
Yeah.
roughly. Obviously, it changes with the full. Yep, that's fine. Thank you.
Are there any other questions for Gareth before we have the speakers? No? Okay, I'd like to call Howard Gresham, who's a parish councillor. If you'd like to take the middle seat, please, Mr. Gresham. Okay, your microphone is on.
Good evening, Madam Chair.
You
and
get
Councillor.
3 minutes and I'll give you a warning at 30 seconds when you
Okay,
come
thank
to an
you.
end.
Would
Thank
it be
you.
possible to get the indicative layout map on the screen for the benefit of the councillors? Right, I understand in principle that the design of this development should not make the flooding worse, but at the moment it is not acceptable and the flight regularly floods, and it's not suitable for development as it stands. If you look at the map, the one previous, on my version of it, you can see contour lines. So I'm just going to have to talk with the use of my hands. To the north of this site, the ground rises, and to the west, to the east of it, it is bounded by a sizable embankment with the Butt Lane. Any rain that falls on this side flows to the south and is in danger of flooding onto the main road. The soil here is heavy clay. It's derived from boulder clay, and so is the subsoil. It overlies ironstone, which is non-permeable. There's no ironstone in this part of the parish, so we've got very limited permeability. In addition to the rainfall falling on the site, we have two 12-inch pipes that enter the site from the west from the railway cutting. These are discharging water onto the site. In addition, to the northwest, there's a 6-inch diameter pipe that drains a sizable arable field. Following heavy rain, that is bringing water onto the site. All this has to come down through the site, down the dike that is in the middle of the field that you mentioned, maybe Riconferro to the left. That dike is slightly higher than the field that the applicant wants to put houses on. And that dike spills over, and following a day of rain, this field sits in 2 inches of water. I know the design statement says that they will not make it worse, but it's not suitable at the moment. Highways have tried to improve the drainage here by improving drainage along the road, but we're still getting water boiling up from the gratings, the gullies on the road, and some of that is bringing sewage out. The whole field, the whole area's got two 12-inch pipes bringing water in, a 6-inch pipe, and it all has to go under the road through two 9-inch pipes. There's nowhere out. This is like a big funnel shape. We've got to get this sorted at this stage. The site needs a swale, which I think is in one of the outline designs, but that needs to be at the north of this site, not at the south. By the time it gets to the south, that water has come down through those houses and it's done the damage. We've got to intercept this water before it gets there. The
30
neighbourhood plan
seconds.
refers to the planting of a woodland to aid water retention. This is not mentioned here, and it will not be on this outline planning permission. We accept the need for new homes. We respect the owner's wish to sell. We understand the developers need to make a profit, but the owners of these new houses, our future neighbours, deserve to have dry homes. The council need to get this right, and we've got this very narrow window of opportunity to get it right. And if we don't get it right, we will also lose the ability to use that reserve site to the north, and we'll be in breach of policy H2 in the neighbourhood plan. So it's now or never.
Okay, thank you very much. Any questions for Mr Gresham? Councillor Pritchett.
I think I might have a question for the officer first. After this stage tonight, is drainage and flooding a reserved matter to be dealt with, or is it to be dealt with tonight?
Drainage is a consideration, but you'll see that there are a number of conditions attached or recommended to be attached to any grant of planning permission, which ask for the precise details to come through. These will change, obviously, with the layout and design that will come forward as part of a reserve matters application. So yes, it's a consideration, but there are conditions attached for those precise details to come in.
Is there any reason why those conditions and them having to look at it in detail, using your local knowledge, can't be dealt with at that stage?
Bit of this, but from my point of view as a local resident, at the moment, the site itself is in the same ownership as the reserve site, as the dismantled railway line where the water is coming from, and the grass field to the north, where in the neighbourhood plan and in previous documents it was discussed that a woodland would be planted to be there as a buffer and use water and moderate this flow of water. If this progresses and this is sold off to a developer, which presumably it will do, we will lose that opportunity because the land will be somebody else's. Who can say where the wood is going to be planted? The developers can promise not to make it worse, and we know that with SUDs and things, that this, whatever it is, sustainable underground drainage scheme. I understand that those developers will not make it worse, but at the moment, if those houses are built, they will stand in water, and it's not 1 in 50 years. This is 3 out of every 4 years.
Councillor Pritchett.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with you. I'm not quite happy with it won't make it any worse. I think you should solve the situation. I mean, if the Dutch can reclaim water like they do and build, then this should be made better rather than, won't make it any worse. And I would expect any condition to actually solve the issue for the better.
Councillor Chandler.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I feel that we should have had a drainage scheme put forward tonight that had been assessed by a drainage expert. Drainage is terribly important. It's heavy clay, as the gentleman has just emphasised. And I think it is absolutely essential that these things are done at the right stages, not further down the line, because Councillor Pritchett is quite right that these things get put off and put off and put off and get watered down in this period of pushing them off. But to me, I coloured this in yellow, and to me, we should have had it tonight. The question is about are you in agreement with me that we should have had a drainage scheme put forward tonight?
I'm not sure how what the protocol is, how this works, but to me, just as a man in the village, it would make common sense. If I was living in a house there, I'd want to think that the drainage was sorted before those footings were dug.
Yeah, thank you.
Just to confirm, members, so this is an outline application. So the outline, as we know, that's the principle of development. I think the reason it tends to be that these bigger parts come later, such as the drainage, is more cost. Developers want to know that the principle is okay before they invest what is often hundreds of thousands of pounds into looking at the drainage scheme. So I would draw your attention to conditions 9 and 10. I'm going to bring Gareth in a second because I think there's an amendment that needs to be made to one of the conditions, but they do deal with the drainage and require that those details are submitted. They are discharge of application, discharge of condition applications that will have to come forward. They will have to be approved by the local planning authority. But if I can just ask Gareth to just clarify what the amendment is to the condition.
I think it was just the amendment, was just a trigger point of when the condition kicks in, prior to development rather than prior to occupation.
Hey, Councillor Illingworth. Brown.
Just to come back, I know we're question here, but just to come back and follow on from Councillor Pritchard, I do tend to agree. We had recently an application here, Gareth, Great Dalby, which Councillor Child quite robustly raised some concerns, and there wasn't the conditions in there to get it ready for the reserve master, so then it's had to go away, and that's caused issues. Could we not strengthen these conditions to be more precise about actually what tests needs to be met before conditions will be discharged or come back at reserve master's stage? Because there is a particular problem in that site. You may as well make it quite clear to the developer what you expect to see rather than leaving it open. And the risk is there could be a lot of us not here at the next time this comes back, to leave it so so we've left a bit of a legacy that secures and the gentleman here, the points that he raises actually addresses those risks.
If I can just point out a couple of things. The site is flood zone 1, so lowest level of flood risk. There is identified surface water flooding. So that's the only risk of flooding at the site. I'll get onto that. There has been a drainage strategy submitted as part of this application.
Councillor Illingworth doing a point of order.
Point of order. We have a speaker who's made a presentation. The session we're in now is questions of the speaker. And these aren't questions of the speaker. We're debating. And, the last two comments haven't been addressed to the speaker. And in any case, are questions that he can't answer.
Yeah.
My understanding is that it's a question of clarification to the officers as to whether the condition could be amended to address the point that was raised in the question to the speaker and the response. So if I can just go back to Councillor Brown's question, I think what Councillor Brown said was, can the condition be reworded to make it stronger and put the requirement in to ensure that security? So I would ask Councillor Brown, do you have an idea of what you mean when you're talking about that? But I think officers, that's what's being asked.
I think we go back to the Great Dalby example and listen to the concerns raised. We can trust the officers, maybe they come up with that wording, but we put that in and it reassures people, because this is one of the last committees that we're all going to sit on, and following the representation questions being made, I just think we have a thing, and I think Gareth can probably quite well, with the help of the team, come up with the correct wording with yourself, Tom. Yeah, and that's all I'm doing. Because I'm not the expert in this, I'm not going to tell Gareth how to do it. Yeah.
So the condition at the moment just requires a drainage scheme to be submitted and approved by the local planning authority. Councillor Brown, you're asking for that to be made stronger. What would you like to see? And this isn't amended, it's a question to ask whether it can be included, not considered.
For example, our reserve matter state put in that as a reserve matters application comes forward, that a full proposal is put forward that's acceptable to the officers and to any other statutory bodies that need to look at that.
So I think the answer to the clarification question is yes, the condition can be amended. I think we need to revisit that at the point after debate in terms of the actual content. The question is yes, it can be amended.
Councillor Holmes.
Thank you at long last, Madam Chairman. When Mr. Gresham, when I brought that up, although my family comes from Edmonthorpe and Wymondham, I had not spoken to you at all.
No.
But I had just seen what I'd seen when we visited the site. And I was obviously very concerned. And also, you mentioned about the wood. Now, so where would this wood be? Where would the trees be? I couldn't, I
Okay.
still can't quite get it, where you would want the trees.
I think it was referred to in the neighbourhood plan that
Yes,
development would be supported if the area to the north of the reserve site was planted to woodland.
so above the
Yes,
hatch site.
uphill from, the hatch
Right.
bit was the reserve site. Then there's the dismantled railway line.
Yes,
I may not have got it quite right, but I think that the idea was that if there was woodland planted to the north of that disused railway line, which at the moment is in the same ownership, that to me is the key point.
yes.
If that is, once this is sold off, how do you make somebody else plant a woodland to solve your problem? This has to be done now. And that will then intercept some of that water coming from the north, from the higher ground, because the tree roots will presumably absorb the water during the summer, dry it out, and it will act as a bit of a sponge.
Can I also ask you, because there's the ditch and that's higher, isn't it?
Yes.
So does it overtop there or not?
It runs over the top of it. And obviously a hydrologist will be able to give you a better answer than me, because it's a bit of a double-edged sword. Sometimes if you clean out ditches, you can move a slight problem over a big area into
Yes.
a massive problem in a small
Yeah.
area. But the problem here is that ditch is so blocked that it spills out. And in effect, the whole of
Right.
this proposed site is waterlogged even before the second half day of rain.
Right.
So there's multiple things that could, excuse me. I feel there's multiple things that could be done, and this site could be made to work. And I understand it will be, I mean, otherwise it's a good site, but most of the places where you could engineer a solution are not on the actual final site, which will be sold to developers. And then it will be outside their control to do out that dike, or to put, I forget what the term is now, a bund, a pond with a throttled outlet. That will all have to be to the north, upstream, because anything they do will, downstream from the houses, will only limit the damage at those houses and the development. It will limit any extra flooding from them. What I'm talking about is trying to cure this problem upstream from these houses. And that will not be on the land that is owned by the developers if this goes ahead. Sorry if that's a bit tangled.
Any other questions for Mr. Gresham? Have you got any questions, Gareth, of Mr. Gresham? No. Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Gresham. I'd now like to call Chris Green, who's the agent. Good evening, Mr. Green. If you just press the face on the microphone, it will come on. You've got 3 minutes and I'll give you a warning at 30 seconds.
Fantastic, thank you. Good evening, councillors, and thank you for the opportunity. My name is Chris Green. I'm a chartered town planner and associate for Andrew Granger, the agent on this application. I'd just like to take this opportunity to wholly endorse the recommendation put forward to you by the planning officer as part of the thorough and concise report. Relevant legislation requires that applications for planning permission must be determined in accordance with the development plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise. The subject application, which represents a site supported by this council through the allocation within the Melton Local Plan 2018, and by the local community through allocation in the Wymondham and Edmonthorpe Neighbourhood Plan, accords entirely with the policies set out in the development framework. And there are no technical reasons or considerations that would justify a departure from that framework. Matters of appearance, landscaping, layout and scale remain reserved for determination by members of this committee through a later application, which in turn will rightly allow for thorough consideration of finer details. However, the extensive suite of accompanying expert reports, including the flood risk assessment and indicative drainage strategy, robustly confirms that the development of the application site is achievable in principle, a fact emphasised within the report, confirming support from the relevant professional statutory consultees. Assessed as required under the guidance in the NPPF, there are significant benefits accruing from the proposal in terms of market and affordable housing supply, ecological gain, and approximately £190,000 in financial contributions to local services through Section 106 agreement. In balance, there are no material issues that can be considered to outweigh these significantly and demonstrably. As such, we fully support the officer's recommendation and respectfully request that the committee approve the application before you this evening. Thank you. I can try and answer any questions.
Thank you. If you just sit where you are. Any questions for Mr. Green? Councillor Holmes.
Thank you. You've heard what the parish council representative has said. And I'm sure, as you say, that the land above belongs to the applicant, as a lot of the land or most of it in Wymondham does. And so do you think that the applicant would be happy to take that on board to have a planting scheme of wood, a wood or something like that to help the situation? I'm sorry to say, I know that you have said that drainage schemes are fine, you know, and everything doesn't work that way, does it? We know that doesn't work because we've had more rain than, you know, 1 in 50 years or 1 in 100 years. We can throw that out of the window. What I'm sure your applicant wants is the best for the village of Wymondham, and you don't want wet houses, obviously. So I just wondered if the owner of the land would be happy to do that, to put this a wood in the scheme.
As I think Gareth alluded to in his report, we had what I believe was a useful workshop meeting with the parish, with the ward member, with Gareth and Andrew, to discuss a number of matters. And it was clearly indicated that the landowner of this land, of adjacent land, is willing to open into discussions as to how wider concerns may be resolved on land that he owns. What we need to consider this evening is the application site in question. A robust report has been carried out by professionals, which has been supported by the council's statutory consultees. Again, another group of professionals, whether that be the Environment Agency, the LLFA, Severn Trent. They've looked at it, and in principle, the development is okay. I'll go back to a point that was raised about it not being any worse. The development of a drainage strategy, the indicative one that was provided as part of the flood risk assessment, included a swale and an attenuation basin as part of sustainable urban drainage. They are just a part of the scheme that would be introduced, be it permeable paving and a network throughout the site. These would be designed to take the surface water, to store the surface water, to move it around the site as necessary, and then to sort of dispose of that water at a set rate. But I believe the flood risk assessment states 5 seconds per litre, which is slower than the greenfield runoff. So actually, by introducing this drainage strategy, you are providing a betterment because you're actually controlling the surface water rather than letting the surface water from the empty field drain into that water course as it likes. You are controlling it, so it is providing a betterment. If there is a solution in the wider area that can be achieved, as I said, that discussion is open. But for members in making a decision tonight, we are just looking at this red line boundary. Hopefully that answers your question.
It might come back. You said that the scheme in an urban area. This is a rural area, and this and the piping and everything is not as great as it is in an urban area. That is for sewage and water, etc. And so we have to look at that. And as for Severn Trent and for the water plot or whatever you like to call it, I'm afraid there are very great doubts about them. We have them and they are not going away. Thank you.
And just
yes, but
just
we're
come
not,
back on
we don't want to call Severn Trent, please.
if I can just come back on that clarification on the urban element. My only reference to urban was as part of the sustainable urban drainage, which is the SUDS. It's the acronym for the drainage solutions. I'm not claiming Wymondham to be an urban area by any stretch.
Any other questions for Mr. Green? No, you got anything, Gareth? No, thank you very much. Well, thank you very much then, Mr. Green. Melise, have you anything to say to us?
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. Most of what I'd written and thought about a lot has already been said and discussed. So I've saved you a lot. I was going to thank the chairman of the Wymondham Parish Council for explaining so carefully how he'd done. And also this is the age-old issue of professionals having a different view to local knowledge and experience. And Mr. Gresham, and I walked over this field yesterday, day before yesterday, whatever it was, with him, has explained the issues. Now, we don't want to stop the development, but we do want to stress to the landowner and his agent that whilst this site and the land and catchment area behind is under one ownership, it'd be far simpler to fix this issue than after this site has been sold off. But as Gareth Elliott explained to me, although sensible, this cannot be a planning consideration. Of course, this development drainage will not solve all Wymondham's drainage issues. And Howard has just given me a paragraph he didn't read out. Of highways have fairly recently attempted to improve the road drainage in this area. But this has resulted in overloading pipes further downstream with water boiling up from gully gratings further along Main Street. Some of this water then enters the sewage system, but Severn Trent have described to me as an open system. This in turn overloads the sewage treatment plants and results in raw sewage being discharged into the river that becomes the River Eye flowing through Melton. So, Madam Chairman, really, as I say, we don't want the development to solve all Wymondham's problems, but having talked to Gareth, who's been very helpful during this, I would like a note to be added to the Outline Planning Commission that there is considerable concern from this committee about the drainage of the area onto this site. And if and when the applicant comes back for further consideration, the committee, whichever committee it is at that time, would need to be reassured that the concerns of the parish council and neighbourhood plan have been fully addressed. And I fully really agree again, really, with what Councillor Holmes has said. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Graham. Any questions for Councillor Graham? No? Any questions, Gareth, for Councillor Graham? No? Fine. Well, thank you very much, Councillor Graham. Right, we're off open to debate then. So who'd like to start this debate? Councillor Pritchett.
Thank you, Chair. Right, spectacles on. Yeah, key for me is the conditions regarding the drainage, of which Councillor Brown has outlined how that can be strengthened. And I should also make a point that I think, as the law stands at the moment, if you have natural land and it floods a neighbour, you're not liable. But if you alter that land substantially, like building a housing estate, then you would be liable for flooding the neighbour, and it is the neighbours that I'm concerned about as well here. Secondly, design, and I will refer to my clarification point. Having visited the location and the excellent buildings in Wymondham, in the area where this development is proposed, some of the buildings around, I would love to own and live in one of them, are what I would describe possibly as buildings of the time. They're not necessarily the finest example of Wymondham in that area. And the building here, which has been stated that the parish wish it to reach the standards of the Manor Gardens, and I also noticed some fine brickwork down Coaston Lane. I think it would be important to add, it would importantly add value. There's a lane coming in opposite. It would add value to the street scene in that area with good design. Less than good design, urban design, I think it would be very, very noticeable and detract to the area. And that is why I'm keen on those policy reference being NPH2, H2 from the neighbourhood plan, and the design housing mix and affordables and design SPDs. So I'd be in favour of that. The only other comment I've got to make on the papers was from the designing out crime. Some of the comments from the designing out crime officer are applicable. If you have something like a nurse's home with women coming and going in all hours of the dark, it's quite important to have lighting, security lighting and hedges and no excessive undergrowth where a stalker could hide. But in terms of this development, I think it's over the top to suggest that you have very limited bushes and it can only be so high. And I think I'd like in the design meetings that will come at the Reserve Matters days that it's interpreted with some wisdom and applying to that local circumstances. So, I mean, I would be quite happy to, at some stage after members have discussed this, to propose subject to those amendments.
Thank you, Councillor Pritchett. Any other? Councillor Evans.
Yes, thank you very much. The one thing that surprised me in a way, given the discussion, is there's no balancing pond requirement here, which is what we're really talking about here when there's a flood of water. Most of these developments have a balancing pond in it as a buffer to stop that happening. And it does surprise me in this situation, the surface water is just going to be proposed to discharge straight into the watercourse with nothing to buffer a sudden flood. And that's when the sudden flood happens, as I know in Long Clawson, that's when you get sewage overflow, when you have a sudden downpour. And that would be my concern here. Thanks to Councillor Brown, I think we've got some recall on this situation in that we have recognised as a committee that this is a big concern, as it was in Great Dalby, and we were proven right in Great Dalby in the end. And I think that's it. But I agree with what's said before. This is an outline planning permission. Design will come later, and therefore I have no other concerns. And as long as we keep a grip, yes, as Helene Holmes says, on Severn Trent and their recommendations. Thank you.
Chandler.
I'm concerned with the response from the Water Authority regarding the sewer records. We advised, although our statutory sewer records do not show any public sewers within the area you have specified, there may be sewers that have been recently adopted under the Transfer of Sewer Regulations 2011. Public sewers have statutory protection and may not be built close to, directly over, or be diverted without the consent, and you are advised to contact Severn Trent to discuss your proposals. May I ask what proposals we put to Severn Trent and what response we've had, because this comes up time and time again. I mean, we've heard tonight from the parish chairman that sewerage comes up out of the drains in certain places in Wymondon. Thank you.
Gareth, can you throw any light on what we've had from Severn Trent about sewers?
The full consultation comments have been included in the appendices from Severn Trent. That's as much as I've had from them. The full comments from Severn Trent have been included within the appendices. That's as much as I've had from them. Yeah.
Any other comments? Councillor Honan.
So sorry, but I've got to come back about this. It is really serious. It is serious for the whole country. It's not just for us. It is serious for everybody. We've come out of a pandemic. Do you not realise? Do people not realise? And you think, oh, this woman's cracker, this old girl's crackers, but this sewerage problem is so important. We could be having a pandemic made of the sewerage. We could. And honestly, I think you want to go back. I wouldn't like to pass this. I would like to defer it and get those statutory people to actually speak to you. It's not your fault. I appreciate that. But
Thank you, Chair. So as part of the application, it's outline with access. So we're looking at the principle of development. We've got an allocated site. We're looking at the access and we haven't got an objection from statutory consultees. So we've gone to Severn Trent. They haven't raised an objection. However, this is the outline consent. So what will follow is further detail through discharge of condition, further detail through reserve matters, and that will bring out further excuse me, technical details, location details, etc. So at those points, we will engage further with Severn Trent and other statutory consultees. So for the purpose of this evening, it is principle of development and the access, but that doesn't mean we won't then have further conversations with all statutory consultees.
come back, Madam Chairman. So that means this has happened so many times over the years. Oh, well, you didn't say that at outline. So everything that we have said tonight will be logged and will be taken note of, will it?
So an opportunity will come up further on for further consultation and further comment. So what I'm saying for this evening, the principle of development and the access, there isn't an objection to those. When additional information comes forward as part of a reserve matters application or a discharge of condition, at that point, they will be reviewed up for comment from yourselves, members of the public and statutory consultees again.
This is all being recorded, Councillor Holmes, so that will be available at a later date when it's required. But as we've said, we are only looking at the outline planning application. Councillor Evans?
Clarification, because obviously Councillor Chandler just pulled out the Severn Trent response. The last sentence, I don't understand. Severn Trent will seek to assist you obtaining a solution which protects the public sewer and the building.
Yeah.
What building are we referring to in that response? I don't know. It says and the building is what it says. Sorry, but that there's no buildings on the site at the moment.
Does that mean the houses, Gareth?
Or is it the building that's being demolished?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure on that. But as I say, this is an outline application. We're looking at the principle and the access. Completely understand the points, but if I can focus you on the principle and the access.
Okay, councillor Pritchett.
Are we clear that the £11,000 for the doctors is in and we don't need any, that's in, is it? That's okay, then included. In other words, if somebody proposes that we approve this, do we need to go through some rigmarole of quoting the exact amendments? Is it noted now that that will be in the list of section 106?
Yeah, I would suggest that if there is a motion put forward with the recommendation that we just go through those amendments so that we're all clear with that, but at the moment there's no motion.
Any more debate before we go to a vote? Okay, the application as the planning officer has recommended permit. So can I have a show of hands? Oh, sorry, we need somebody. Are you doing the motion, Don?
I'll propose the motion subject to amendment to conditions as proposed and outlined by Councillor Brown regarding drainage and flooding, and the amendment to conditions possibly 3, 2 and 5 relating to the inclusion of housing mix and affordables and design SPD and H2 of the neighbourhood plan and the £11,000 for the Leicestershire and Rutland CCG.
There was also the amendment to condition 9, which was it previously says that the drainage details will be done submitted prior to occupation. It should say prior to development. Are you happy with that as well?
I'm quite content with that one, Mr. Solicitor.
So we've had a motion. Sorry, that's okay. We've had a motion. Oh. Thank you. So we've had a motion. Can we all vote on that? Can we have a seconder? Ronan, Councillor Brown seconded.
I'll second it. Yeah.
Can we have a vote on the motion?
We've got a motion on the table.
We've got a motion on. We've got a motion on the table, Councillor Holmes, and that's what we're voting on. Okay. So are we all in favour of the motion? And against? 2. Any abstentions? 1. The motion's carried. Yeah. Yeah. So
May I have
now
my vote
can
recorded, please.
Councillor Chandler wishes her vote to be recorded. So
And Councillor Holmes.
and Councillor Holmes. So can we have a show of hands for? So we don't have to vote on it then? No, that was the motion we voted on.
We just voted on the motion.
Oh, we've done it then. Oh, sorry. Right. So that has been permitted. So thank you all for your time. I'm sorry for the delay in the beginning, but we can blame the traffic in Melton for that. Not down to councillors. So I now close the meeting at 8:18. Thank you and good night and a safe journey home.